Hi, good afternoon and welcome to our deep dive session. Your session hosts this afternoon will be Krisztina, Keresztely and myself, Trenkler-Fraser, and we will be talking about project costing and how to create and estimate a project budget. Basically, we can take both terms together, they mean the same thing. Project costing is a key task within the funding and resourcing process. And without knowing how much your project will cost, you don't know how many resources and money to ask for or to account for. So developing a project budget is not only important for the funding strategy to look for funding and know what type of funding you need, but it is also very important once you become aware of a funding opportunity and you want to go for funding and apply for it, because by then you really need to have quite a detailed project budget available. So you can see already kind of that all these different funding and resourcing topics are quite interlinked. The funding strategy is interlinked with the project costings, and that is also interlinked with the application writing. And so there are lots of connectivities. And as I said this morning already, when Krisztina and I developed this new tool set for all these resourcing and funding topics, we were thinking of this metro line metaphor to be quite useful in this respect to help you along. And yes, you can see it here. If you haven't got the little Z card, this metro line system, you see that there are 5 metro lines, all depicting one key theme of the funding and resourcing process. And within each of the lines, there are the stops, metro line stops, which are the connecting points, so to speak, with the relevant guides and tools and templates for these particular tasks of that theme. So the first, you can see it, the first line is called inventory line. And this is a line which, or a theme, which helps you to check all your basic capacities and assets and resources. Here, for instance, you find stops which guide you to glossaries of financial terms or job specifications of a funding grant officer, just to get an impression of what that implies, or a skills assessment checklist. So there are many various different tools there in that line which can help you along. The second line is the red line of the funding strategy. And here every chapter of the funding strategy has its own stop, and you can go eventually when it's on the URBACT website, you will be able to go in there and get a whole explanation and tables and templates which help you along addressing each of those chapters. And also before the preparation and after the appraisal, there are all relevant tools there for you. The third line is the blue line, and this is the project design line, and that is the closest link to your action planning work which you're doing already, in terms of thinking about projects. But here this line exists in our context here to ensure that really all aspects are covered in your project description to inform the fourth line, the yellow line, the project costing line. Because if you want to do a good project costing, you do need to be aware of all these different aspects of a good project design. And the yellow line will be further explained to you by Krisztina in due course. And the last line, the green line, is then all about how to write a successful funding application, and that will be discussed tomorrow, of course, by Marion Cugnet in more detail. And again, you will find range of guides and topics there once it is on the URBACT website tool or in the tool set. And this whole tool set is designed to be as practical and user-friendly for cities as much as possible. It is designed for beginners who have not been experienced in some of those areas and tasks, but it hopefully is also very useful for advanced cities to benchmark them or to check what kind of tools they use and approaches they use, and to get maybe new ideas or just to compare what they are doing. So hopefully it is really working for a wide range of cities, and the main thing for us is to ensure that it is of help and assistance to you. Coming back to our topic today, the project costing. And before I hand over to Krisztina, I just would like to point out some more detail, just a couple of things to you. Of course, the main purpose of project costing is to know how much your project will cost. It's in the name. But you must be mindful that project costing is not the same as project funding. Project costing is really just about to establish how big your project is, how many resources, time, effort, equipment, external consultants, possibly, the project needs to be successfully implemented. It is all project costing is before you even think about where the funding is coming from. Where the funding is coming from is then dealt with funding strategy and sourcing of funding. But project costing is really just to look at the project itself. Because even if your project doesn't need any actual money or maybe external resources, city can all fund it itself by its existing budget, or maybe you only need some time from staff. You still need to know how much time from staff you need, just for the organizational agenda and management of your organization, and just to be able to know, is it a 2,000 euro project or a 200,000 euro project? Quite a difference in time and effort needed. So there are many good reasons why creating a project budget is really important and helpful to you. And in the next slide, I show you three particular ones. And here, yes, I summarized them there. And of course, the first purpose is to ensure that you have sufficient money to complete the project. Nothing is more annoying than having asked for 20,000 euro and halfway through the project you find that actually you should have asked for 10,000 euro more to complete it. So better to ensure that before, that you have a realistic budget to get it right and not come into difficulties of not being able to complete. The second important point is also to knowing about your project costing and your project budget enables you to be more convincing to decision makers, funders, but also politicians or anybody you need to bring on board, because you come across as knowledgeable about what they let themselves in for, how much money you need. It just gives a better impression. And the third point would be to be, of course, more efficient. Creating a project costing, a project budget, requires a bit of time and thinking it through your project design, and are able to come to an estimate of the costs. And that creates a space for you to reflect on the project design itself. And eventually, when you try and source funding and you might not find the right amount, it also makes you more able to maneuver your costs in your project more knowledgeably or more efficiently. You know how to adjust and adapt better when you know how much each project activity costs. In the other slide, in the next slide, I would like to just show some of the essentials of preparing a project costing. And of course, costing project is not rocket science, but you do need some time as I said already, to get in the zone, to engage with your project. And here, first of all, it is important that you do know about your project ideas, what project activities are involved. You must have clarity how many activities you have, how long they take, what your project seeks to achieve as well, to get sort of right, do you want to engage with 20 citizens or with 2,000? Again, this is this size issues, the ballpark figures really to know this. And mentioned it a couple of times already, the time you need to think through each and every stage of the project, every project activity, what do we want to do? How many staff will we need to accomplish this stage? How experienced does the staff need to be to accomplish and work on that project at individual stages? Do you need 5 directors and 1 junior member? Or do you need 1 director and 5 junior members? It does make a difference on your salary costs. So these are the things you need to have this space and for reflection and thinking it through. And of course, what is extremely helpful and necessary as well is access to experience. This could be either your own experience from previous projects, similar projects where you knew, okay, this aspect took that long and you needed that much time and effort to do this. Could be colleagues who have implemented similar projects in the past, or pilot project you have run and you draw the lessons from how that went. Or if you have none of this, then you might want to ask suppliers and service providers to help you along with some quotes for certain activities and tasks. So good preparation is really key for a project costing exercise. And while you need time and effort for learning, this will reward you. Spending this time thinking it through will make you a better project designer and manager at the end of the day, because you have this knowledge of detail in your project. It makes you more competent, more confident, and therefore more convincing to decision makers and funders. And it will ultimately make you more successful because you're more in control of accessing funding sources, and again, trying that you can adapt and maneuver your cost headings more appropriately. But of course, you already know these benefits, because otherwise you wouldn't be here today. And thank you so much for coming here to this session. But at this point, I would like to hand over to Krisztina to continue with this session, because I have to go to the office hours. But I wish you a very successful and entertaining afternoon session here with Krisztina. I'm sure you enjoy it. And thank you very much for listening so far. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Regina, and hello, everybody. Just very, very briefly, my name is Krisztina Keresztely. I'm an urban researcher, and I've been the partner of Regina's in this work where we developed this metro line system for funding and resourcing. And basically, I supported our tandem with the methodological and systemic thinking and other very useful advices and work together. So now we already presented ourselves, but we would like also to know a bit more about you. I saw that there are many people from URBACT, from cities, but still maybe it would be nice to see how you are approaching urban project costing. And I would like to all of you to go to Slido now. On the right-hand side of the screen, you have a Slido button. And here you could find the first question that we would like to ask you. Could you please rate your experience in designing budget for projects? So if you have many experiences, please go until 10, or if you have nothing, please just put 0, and just to let where you are at in this field. So you have like a few seconds to do that. Okay, thank you very much. So we can see here the results of this vote, and I see that we are really on a good spread of experiences, because I think that most of you rated yourself for 8, but also we have some people going a little bit lower experiences. But globally, you are really in the middle of this, so you consider that you know costing, however, project budgeting. Thank you very much for this. I think it's a good information for us to see that we are really knowing a lot about budgeting, but we could also know more. So this is always this. Let's go to the second question that we would like to ask you. So still on the slide, though. So what is the first word that comes to your mind when thinking about budgeting? Just quickly, when you think about costing, budgeting, what is the first thing that you think about? Okay, thank you very much. So I think that we are all on somehow the same side sometimes. So many of you put, of course, the difficulties of costing and budgeting, which is absolutely certain that we sometimes are afraid of this, and we feel that it is very complex, very difficult, boring, and it's coming really at the end when we have already created a nice project, but we have now to make a budget. But you put also interesting other mentions, so funding, of course, but as Regina said, when you are making a costing or a budgeting for a project, it's not the same as funding. So basically, when you cost a project, it's really about also designing your project, because the things are going parallel to each other, and this is also related to your ideas, the ideas when we think about money, euros, budget lines, of course, but basically money and euros, linking this to project costing, because of course it is talking about money and euros, but it's also talking about our how we design a project, how our different activities can be designed, how long the activities will last, who will participate. So basically, it says that our project costing needs to go parallel to the project design, and it's somehow in between design and implementation. This is linked also to eligibility, of course, finding the good cost categories, etc., etc. So thank you very much. Of course, maybe we will have this word cloud for later on, or we can see it at a later moment, but now we have to go on because the time is not so long. And I will ask the technical team to get back to the presentation, please. And as you see from this word cloud, we are facing a really complex process, which is costing. And in our metro line system, which is about funding and resourcing, we consider the complete line, which means rather a complete process and session plan for in case of a training, or a process which means the creation of a project budget. So this is important to see that in our metro line system, the costing line, the creation of these budget headings is really linked to the project design. So it's not linked to the budget writing when you have already a concrete goal and you need to create your budget. But here we are really talking about costing, so about the assessing and estimating the cost of a budget and linking it to the different activities. So basically, in our costing line, we identified the main steps of budget costing. The first step that we created in the line is putting out the basics, so the basic activities, the basic elements of the project, just to have an overview of our project. Then we have 5 steps where which are related to each of the headings of the budget. And the last 2 steps will talk about, firstly, the creation of a total budget, and an important, crucial step of this is the budget appraisal. So let's go to the next slide, please. There, I just put here the 5 most important parts of this, or let's say for our today discussion, the 5 basic elements of the project. So first of all, salary costs, which are basically the estimation of the inputs required from the staff members, the staff salaries for managing and implementing the project. So it's basically the workload and how many costs does it mean. The second big group of cost lines is admin costs, indirect admin costs, which is basically related to all the indirect costs, office and admin costs that are necessary for the implementation of your project. Thirdly, project expenditure and equipment costs. So these are all the costs that are linked to equipment that are incurred by your project in relation to all of the project activities. Important thing is to be really sure that all these are justified in your project activities. The same for the travel and accommodation costs. So these are all the costs that are linked to travel activities and, if necessary, accommodation and subsidiary that are linked to your different project activities and needed for your outputs. And at the end, cost and external expertise. So everything that you estimate that external support is needed, external service is needed, they are to be here. So we would like to go a little bit closer to these different lines. But to do that, I will ask you to go back to the Slido. And we would like to invite you to a short quiz with 5 short, very difficult questions. So let's start with this, please. Yeah. So which are the 3 key elements that help you in designing a project budget? So you can choose 3 elements. Sufficient time to think through each step of the project, the name and address of the project team members, enough information about the project activities, the euro exchange rate, or access to experienced staff members. So please find the 3 good answers. Okay. So of course, the good answers were found by almost all of you. So sufficient time is needed to think through each step of the project. This is what Regina also emphasized. Enough information about all the project activities, of course. So this is needed in order to really create a good costing, to know every activities, and access to experienced staff members, because however you need to know costing, project costing, and you need experienced appraisals as well in your team. But you don't need to have the name and address of your team members, and neither the euro exchange rate. This is not at this stage. Let's see the second question. Which are the 3 key elements? No, sorry, it was this. What do you need to consider when estimating your staff costs? So again, you have 4 answers here, and you need to choose 2 answers, 2 good answers. So name, age, and marital status of each project staff member, the approximate number of days required for implementing each project activity, the seniority level of the type of staff that will be delivering the project, or the cost of office furniture used by the project staff. Okay, thank you very much. So yes, again, you found it. The approximate number of days required for implementing each project activity. Of course, this is one of the most important elements of identifying your salary costs, the staff cost, and the other element is the seniority level. Of course, the name marital status, as you all knew, it was not really relevant, and either the cost for office furniture, because this is rather in the indirect cost that we can put it. These are part of your office and admin costs. Thank you very much. Let's see the third question. What do you do when you don't know much a required service or item will cost? How much a required service or item will cost? So you can say, I guess the cost and hope it will be okay. Or you can say, I contact around 3 service providers and get an estimate. Or I ignore those costs and don't put them into the budget. Or I ask a colleague with experience in similar projects and commissions. You can choose 2 good answers. Thank you for the answers. So again, you found it. So either you contact 3 providers and you got an estimate. Of course, here in this stage, you don't need to have a concrete price, but it's good to have a good estimate, or you ask a colleague who can help you. Ignoring it or guessing is not a good idea, because then if you put a bad number, which is not realistic, then you can hinder the realization of the feasibility of your activity if it's linked to the relevant service, of course. And let's see the 4th question, please. So what does value for money mean? Either the project costs are as low as possible, or the project costs are as high as possible, or they are appropriate to the anticipated outputs and results, representing an effective and efficient approach. Here you can choose only one good answer. Yes, as all of you found a good answer, value for money, it's really about how to link the price, the cost of your project to your results and outputs. So to be realistic, to have to cover realistically your outputs, you need to identify a good costing. Very nice. So let's see the 5th question, please. What should you do? What should you always do when you have completed the costing of a project? So you can ask an inexperienced colleague to appraise the budget, or an experienced person to appraise the budget and provide feedback, or you can put the budget in a drawer and never look at it again. Yeah, thank you very much. So the good answer is, of course, to ask an experienced person to appraise the budget and provide feedback. You can, of course, also put it into the drawer, but then it doesn't have too much. And of course, you can also ask an inexperienced colleague, but if she or he doesn't give you a good answer, then it's not a good choice. So basically, the essential of this question is to show you that it's really important that once you have already made your costing, to have a feedback and an appraisal of your budget. And in our costing line, we also provide you a set of questions as a tool for potential appraisal of your costing and the budget. Thank you very much for this quiz. If you have any questions, you can put them on the chat already, or we can also have questions at the end of the session, of course. And we are getting to a closing part of this session. And as a closing part, I would like to ask you once again to go to the Slido. And we have a last question. To think over the total budget. So once you have worked on all these different parts of the budget, from salary till external costs, and you got an overview, you got an appraisal, So let's think a little bit about this overview estimation or evaluation of your projects, and think about what are the risks of underestimating the cost of your project. So you have 1 minute, and please just put phrases or short phrases or wordings, so free text into the Slido. Let's see, what are your thoughts about this? Okay, thank you very much. The answers are coming. I'm really happy with this, and I just can get out some answers that I found really interesting or very important. So, of course, when we are talking about this costing of projects, that at this stage of our founding strategy, it's basically about costing our activities, and we can always, through the appraisal and as we are parallel to the project design, we can always get back to our project and of course change our activities. So it's when you talk about failure and the bad quality of the project, fortunately, at this stage of costing, we still have the chance to change our activities. This is why it's important to talk about over and underestimating. But of course, when we are in a real project or call context, when we are really working on our project budget, underestimating, it's a real risk for the feasibility of the project and for going for a good quality of our activities. And as you said, or wrote several of you, a lack of trust and a lack of confidence with our partners. So what I find is very important, and I found it at one of your comments, is that giving money back is not a problem. So maybe it's this comment wanted to say that underestimating could be a problem because we don't have enough funding, but if we overestimate, it's still could be better. But you need to think also about this dichotomy between these two things. So underestimating it can hinder the feasibility because you have not enough fund, of course, for creating something, and your budget is not not corresponding to your activities. But it's the same problem when you are overestimating, because then you have less activities and outputs than the cost of your budget, and so it's also hindering the value for money of your the good value for money of your project. So this is something that you always need to think about when you are creating a project costing. Project costing, sorry. Just to have maybe a summary of this session, can we just please go back to the slide and see the last slide of our presentation? Yeah, the key messages of this session that we try to bring you. So first of all, when you want to cost your project, please take your time, prepare in details your project, and be sure that you have experience previously to project costing. So you have at least 1 or 2 team members who has experience in project costing. So think through each project activity, including governance, so including the project leading and how the project governance looks like. Be sure that all your costing headings are corresponding to the activities, that the equipment, the travels, everything is represented in your costing. And don't just guess costs for equipment services, but get quotes of advice and work together. So basically, as we said in our quiz, if you just guess the cost, or you just don't put the equipment cost into your budget, that will be really a risk for the feasibility of your activities. Be aware of putting costs that are really in relation to outputs and results. So take care of the value for money of your project, and check if all the expenditures are really justified in the project description. So this is a very important point, that when you have the budget, please get back to your project design and see if you really talk, and the logic of your project, you really have all the elements described and justified that after you put into the budget, because sometimes there can be difficult differences or lack of coherence, and in case if you are already in the application writing, this could be a problem, and yeah, it's a lack of eligibility even. And always ask an experienced person to appraise the draft budget. Yes, when you have already your budget, the first draft of your budget, always go and appraise it and see if everything is corresponding to your budget. So thank you very much for your attention.